Good evening. Welcome to Silver Slumbers, a channel where I'm tasked to help you get those soothing Z's that you deserve. If you have any suggestions, such as story topics or what kind of background noise you'd be interested in, I'll put a poll in the community tab before uploading the next video. This will be a great way to have you all interact with me and vice versa. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more videos like these. Lastly, if you are enjoying what you are hearing, down below in the description box, if you'd like to buy me a coffee, it will be really appreciated as it does help me and the channel out. I thank you in advance. In today's video, I'm going to be reading True Survivor Stories, Part 1. So sit back, relax, and close those eyes. And remember, don't get lost in the dark. Warning, these stories contain very graphic violence. Viewers' discretion is advised. This happened to me almost 4 years ago. It's by far the most extreme and life-threatening situation I've ever been in. The eyewitness account you're about to read is 100% true, and it's all mine. For some understanding, this happened in the United States. It was the summer of 2012. My longtime boyfriend and I had recently got married, even though we were dirt poor college students and lived in a dinky apartment. We were having a blast. This particular summer, we gathered our friends at a local movie theater almost every weekend. This was just down the street from our apartment that had really cheap movie tickets. A night out that was under $10 was certainly within our budget. Anyway, one Thursday night, and I received a call from this group of friends. inviting us to watch the midnight premiere of the newest Batman movie. I had just finished working a 12-hour shift. I was pretty tired. I almost refused the invitation and thought of crashing in my apartment instead. However, I didn't want to miss out the fun, and it was a movie I wanted to see for a while anyway. Certainly, it wouldn't do any harm if I stayed up a little later than usual and missed a few hours of sleep, right? At 10:30 p.m., we all met at the theater. We passed large cardboard cutouts of Catwoman and Batman as we walked inside, greeted by the smell of buttery popcorn and the chatter of excited moviegoers. The ticket booth was on the right of the entrance, and just above the electric list of movies that were being played. The midnight showing, The Dark Knight Rises, was displayed in there in the bright red colors. Being paranoid that the tickets would sell out quickly, one of my friends swung by earlier the day and purchased the tickets for all of us. We bypassed the ticket line and went straight to the ticket taker. She smiled at us and kindly directed us to Theater 9, which was on the right side of the lobby. If only I had known what I do now, that among the crowd, a killer was lurking. That as I walked across that tacky red and purple carpet towards Theater 9, I could have been walking to my death. I think about how often now what I would have done if I had known. Pull the fire alarm, call the police, scream for the people to run away, but of course, I had no way of knowing what was about to happen. Oblivious to the peril I was putting myself in, I pushed open the doors for Theater 9 without giving it a second thought. The hallway to this theater was shaped like a U, and you can go either right or left. Theater 9 was the largest screening room in the building, perfect for accommodating the crowd that midnight premieres brought in. Not even the previews had started yet, because there was still a good hour and a half left until the movie actually started. We entered on the right side, so all of the seats were to our left. I remember being surprised at just how packed the theater was. Just about almost every seat was filled. Much to our dismay, at first it seemed like we wouldn't find a spot to sit together. Now, the way the theater was set up, there was a section of seats right in the front of the screen. This area was flat, and there were about 5 rows of seating in this section. A lot of seats in this section were empty, and sitting in the front of the movie screen sucks, and none of us wanted to sit there. One of my friends then spotted a row with 5 empty seats, all next to each other, perfect for the amount of people we had. These seats were about 3 or 4 rows up from where the seats rows started to elevate. We ran up the stairs before someone could take the seats and fill in. My husband, Brock, sat in the 5th seat. I sat next to him, and my friend Samantha sat next to me on my right side. Her boyfriend, Tommy, sat next to her, and another friend named Leo sat in the aisle seat. We spent the next several minutes casually chatting, joking around, and laughing. After a while, my 3 friends went to the lobby to buy drinks and that addicting movie theater popcorn. After they were gone, Brock and I passed the time by, people watching. The theater was bright since the lights weren't dim yet, and I could see everyone clearly. There were lots of people dressed as Batman and have Batman t-shirts with their hoodies on. One person even had a mask and one of those shirts with attached cape. There were a lot of kids in the audience as well, which wasn't surprising because even though it was a Thursday night, it was summer vacation, so that meant no school the next day. Of all the people I saw, the person I will never forget was a little girl sitting in the same row a few chairs away. She was really cute, blonde with blue eyes, and passed us several times on her way to the lobby, each time coming back with various snacks and popcorn. Overall, people seemed very excited to see the movie, and the room was filled with energy and laughter. After what seemed like an eternity of waiting, the lights start to dim and the previews begin. Just like every movie I've seen, a quick animation flashed across the screen, reminding us to get refreshments from the lobby. We were already devouring the popcorn like ravenous animals. To silence our cell phones and to make sure we all know where the emergency exits are. The animation had this ugly CGI cat in a tuxedo that was sitting in the movie theater. I casually glanced at the bright green emergency signs that were on the left side and right side of the movie screen. I didn't think much of the reminder, like usual. After that, I only remember one preview for The Man of Steel. The others, I'm not sure what they were about. When the movie started, the theater erupted into cheering and clapping. The title of the movie, The Dark Knight Rises, exploded onto the screen. This was followed by the scene where Bane is hijacking the plane. I thought this scene was pretty cool and it caught my interest right away. Only when the movie started to get a little less interesting, I did remember just how tired I was. I decided I would just close my eyes at more boring parts to get a little bit of rest. I had been awake for 20 hours at this point, so I was rightfully sleepy. My eyes were closed for most of the duration of the Batman and Catwoman encounters. I don't really remember what was going on in that part of the movie. Perhaps some of you have seen it and know what I'm talking about. Anyway, when I opened my eyes again, Bruce Wayne was on his computer digging up information on Catwoman. This was the last scene I saw, and I never got to watch the rest of the movie. All of a sudden, a loud bang erupted from the left side of the movie theater. I sort of screamed a little because it startled me. A strange smell started to fill the auditorium. It was like the smell of fireworks, so I thought it was a cherry bomb or something similar. Had someone thrown in fireworks into the crowd of people as a prank? Then down near to the right side of the movie screen, the dark silhouette of a person caught my attention. They were just a black frame against the bright movie screen. A series of flashing lights was coming from this person. It was a weird moment where time literally slowed down and everything was strangely quiet. I was completely frozen, unable to move and really unable to think at all. It was like my brain had stopped working entirely. Brock caught on immediately what was happening, and he grabbed me. He pulled me to the ground and lay on top of me, shielding me with his own body. At this point, the sounds returned to me. I could hear the gunshots ringing out across the theater. People were screaming. The movie was still playing on top of it all, creating a chaotic explosion of sound. I realized the flashing lights had been bullets flying out of a gun barrel. An instant sensation of adrenaline flooded through my body. There was absolutely nothing I could do except lay there and hope to God that the bullets I heard ripping through the seats and walls wouldn't go through me too. At one point, shrapnel hit my head, cutting off a good chunk of my hair, and as I was reaching for a spot to make sure that I wasn't bleeding, hot pieces of metal fell into my hand. I was lying face up, so I could see everything that was happening. The lights from the still playing movie danced across the ceiling and walls. My friends were on the floor with me. Our unfinished bucket of popcorn was spilled all over across the floor. Leo had his legs sticking out of the aisle because there wasn't enough room for him to hide completely behind the seats. At some point, Samantha's water bottle, which had been in a cup holder between our seats, exploded. Water splashed all over my face. The smell of gun smoke was overwhelming. Riot-grade tear gas made me cry and caused me to cough uncontrollably. There was another smell too, the horrible metallic smell of blood that I'll never forget. I remember my lower body suddenly felt wet all of a sudden. For some reason, I thought this came from the leaking water bottle, but I soon realized that this wasn't the case. All of a sudden, things were strangely quiet. The bullets had stopped for some reason. Tommy shouts, "Let's get out of here." We took advantage of the opportunity and made a run for it. We ran down the stairs, across the front of the screen, towards the green light exit sign. We crammed into a small closet-like space where the door was. It was so dark, we had a hard time finding it. We were screaming and slamming on some walls to find a door, blinded by the tear gas and dumbfounded by shock. Then finally, my hands felt the metal door handle, and I pushed against it with all my strength. The door flew open, and the light of the nearby street light flooded our eyes. We pushed against the door so hard that we all fell into the concrete. Samantha lost her pink flip-flops just outside the doorway. As I scrambled to my feet and literally ran for my life, I realized that my legs were red, absolutely soaked with blood. It was like I dipped my legs into a bathtub full of it. I checked my body all over and realized I wasn't injured at all. Where had this blood came from? I looked behind me and realized that the blood was from my husband's. He had been shot in the leg. A massive gaping hole had ripped through the lower half of Brock's right leg. His foot was barely hanging on and dangling lifelessly. Leo, and a young man I didn't recognize, was carrying Brock because, after falling outside the door, he had lost all his strength and he couldn't walk. I was completely shocked. I had no idea he had been injured, especially since he was right behind me the whole time and managed to escape the movie theater all by himself. How did he do it on one foot? I'll never know. At this point, I screamed. My scream was so loud that it had alerted nearby construction workers. At the back of the movie theater, there was a narrowing parking lot, followed by a grassy lawn and the park, and then the street beyond that. The construction workers were doing road repairs in the street, but as soon as they heard my scream and saw us running, they stopped working and watched to see what was going on. I'm not sure why this was such a vivid part of my memory. Anyway, they carried Brock along the sidewalk, all the way to the end, where the corner of the building is. This was quite a distance, several dozen feet. My husband then collapsed from exhaustion and pain, saying that he couldn't move anymore. He lay down, and a puddle of blood started to form underneath him. I looked back and realized that we had left a trail of blood leading from the door all the way to our current position. I was trembling. I knelt beside Brock and glanced around to see who else was injured. Tommy had been shot in the knee and the hip and was further away in the parking lot. The teenager who helped my husband was also injured. His dad and mom were with him. His mom was sitting against the wall and looked like she was going to pass out. She was bleeding from several places. That family escaped at the same time as we did. I guess they heard the bullet stop and decided to make a run for it too. We were all lucky because the shooting was still going on inside. I had to take off my shirt and use it to stop the bleeding. I'll never forget how lifeless and limp my leg was. And I imagine that's what a dead body must feel like. I got blood all over my hands and arms. The police showed up really fast. I say we were outside for maybe a minute or two before the red and blue sirens filled the night and rushed to our location. We were literally a block away from the police station. A female officer stood by us the whole time until paramedics arrived, which they took a very long time. Brock was one of the last to be taken to the hospital. He was bleeding out for almost 20 minutes before an ambulance was able to pick him up at the same street with the road work. At this point, he had become almost unresponsive and was on the verge of unconsciousness. Several massive guys rushed across the grass with a stretcher, loaded him into it, and then ran with him back into the waiting ambulance. I wasn't able to go with him because there was another injured person in the vehicle, and it was too crowded. I wandered around in front of the movie theater alone, unsure of where my friends had went. My blood-stained shirt and a pool of blood were left behind on the corner of the sidewalk. Walking through the crowd felt like a dream. I couldn't believe what was happening. People were in hysterics and crying. A lot of people, such as me, were covered in blood. And like me, I'm pretty sure the blood staining their skin and clothes wasn't their own. A lot of people seemed to notice how lonely and dazed I looked, so they kept me company and offered me a ride to a different hospital to find Brock, because I haven't been told what hospital he's been taken to. I hung around these people for a while as police swarmed the area and asked us what we saw inside the theater. The whole parking lot was on lockdown, and we weren't allowed to be inside or leave anytime soon. It was around 2 a.m, so it was pretty dark outside still, and I was still pretty cold, wearing only an undershirt and shorts. The flashing of red and blue lights of what seemed like 100 police vehicles were blinding me. I remember seeing a big police vehicle pulling up and said something like, "Crime Scene Investigation Unit." I think that's when it really sank and hit me. I started to get sick to my stomach and really wanted to vomit. And somehow, I was able to hold it all back in. Eventually, police started letting people leave. I jumped into my truck and booked it out of there. I was in so much panic that I didn't even think about going back to my apartment, grab my cell phone, and call my parents or someone else to help me. I was angry, upset, scared, and most of all, still in a state of shock. Was I really going to lose Brock, only a month shy of our first anniversary, because of some psychopath with a gun? Thankfully, by the time dawn rolled around, I found the hospital that he was being treated in. This was the next city over, maybe 45 minutes from the theater, if you're going to go from the speed limit. I was so happy to be there, and the hospital staff were all so welcoming and understanding. After making sure that I wasn't injured as well, they let me wait in the ICU room that Brock would be placed in when he was done recovering from surgery. I was so glad that he was alive. Brock and Tommy both had survived, though many others weren't so lucky. I found out the following day, after so much needed sleep on the hospital couch, that 12 people were killed in the shooting and over 70 people were injured. I remember they first thought that 50 people were killed, but the real number was 12. The little blonde girl sitting in my row, she didn't make it. She died in the theater, no more than a few feet from us. She had been shot. A heartbroken police officer who cried during his court testimony tried unsuccessfully to save her by carrying her out of the theater and have her taken to hospital. Tommy was rushed to a different hospital in the back of the police car. He underwent surgery and made a full recovery. The bullet missed his hip bone and narrowly missed his urinary tract and bladder. According to the surgeons, my husband lost almost half of his blood. Brock made it to the hospital just in time. A year later, and he would have died. He underwent several blood transfusions and was in the hospital for 21 days. The wound to his leg was severe enough that they had to amputate it after trying unsuccessfully to save it. It's been so long since the shooting had happened that my husband's friends and I had been able to recover from it somewhat. The event was pretty horrifying. and had left us scarred for sure. I wouldn't consider this part of a story to be creepy though. No, the creepy part is the shooter himself. I later learned much about him from the murder trials that would follow in the coming years. Through my encounters with this man was very brief, he has affected my life greatly. Just to know that people like this exist is very disturbing. He is certainly one twisted individual that I would never want to meet again. I learned everything from watching the television trial that took place in early 2015. This guy was going to school for neuroscience or something in California. I guess he was a pretty smart guy. However, for some reason he had an obsession with killing people and had a stalker mentality. After dropping out of his university, he moved to my state and chose my local theater to commit a mass shooting. Before that, he was planning on hiding along remote hiking trails up in the mountains, jumping people, pulling them to the woods, and killing them there. Though he never went through the idea, he stalked my theater for months and had this shooting all planned out for the night of July 20th. Though I never saw him before this, it was unnerving to think that this guy could have watched us every time we went to the theater, and we would have never known it. We were completely unaware of what he had planned against us. This completely ruined my sense of security, because who knows what the next stranger next to you is planning on doing to you. I came very close to the shooter, but I never actually saw his face in person until I was forced to testify in court. Of course, I saw his mugshots on television, but while in the theater, I only saw him as a dark silhouette in the shadows, like a demonic figure rendered from the darkness and most sinister nightmare. He was even in the hallway that we passed upon running for the emergency exit. The only thing that stopped him from killing us there was because his gun was jammed. To commit this crime, he ordered a few thousand of ammunition, riot gear, and armor, tear gas, an assault rifle, and a shotgun. He took pictures himself, which were shown in court, wearing all of his gear like some sick trophy, holding up these weapons with a menacing smile. He dyed his hair orange and put on this creepy black contacts to make him look devilish faces into his camera. Something that made me sick just looking at it. Before driving to the theater with all of this gear in his car, he booby-trapped his entire apartment to set to explode if anyone tried to open the door. Then, once at the theater, he posed as a moviegoer and then bought a ticket for the movie. I think his ticket had Theater 8 on it, which was next door, but Theater 9 had more people in it, so he went into number 9 instead. He was in the few front rows. I must have passed him several times in the lobby while he was there. Maybe he had seen me too. At some point during the movie, he had gone up and went through the side door exit, which didn't have an alarm for some reason, kept it propped open with something, then went to his car to put on his armor and grabbed his weapons. Then he came back inside and started shooting. When we escaped the theater, we ran past his white car, which was parked right next to the exit. We didn't even notice it. At some point, he came outside and he would have seen us there on the concrete. I don't know what would have stopped him from shooting people from the outside too, but he could have easily killed us there if he wanted to. I think the hardest part for me was facing this twisted individual in court. I'll never forget rising as they called my name, walking down the center row, past my family, other survivors, and crowds of news hunkered media personnel. I sat there, right across from him, maybe only 10 feet away, while his orange hair was gone and he wasn't wearing those black contacts. Being so close to him was a creepy, uncomfortable experience. My encounters with this man are certainly ones I will never forget. I can now say that I come face to face with a true, deranged psychopath. He just had this blank stare in his eyes the whole time. If eyes truly are windows to the soul, then his soul was filled with nothing but a cold indifference for those who had murdered and harmed. He wouldn't even look at me. Sitting there across the room in the court was the second time I had knowingly been in the same room with this man. A man who tried to take my life but thankfully failed. A man who would end up spending forever behind bars. He was sentenced to 3 1,318 years in prison for his crimes. This is to the man who tried to kill me, the man who caused countless nightmares and fueled the fires of my paranoia, the man who hurt my friends and family, causing years of untold grief for my husband because he will never walk the same again. The man who stole the innocence and joy from a 6-year-old child who went into theater alive and came out dead. To the man who carried out the worst mass shooting in Colorado history. Let's never meet again, ever. I hope you rot in prison. I was homeless in Long Beach, California in 1980 at 16 years old because my mom was in federal prison and my dad lived in Texas. I was staying in the cars and garages. I was hitchhiking from downtown to Belmont Shores on one day and was given a ride by a dude who was kind of strange, but I wasn't worried. I was already a hard drug user and had been arrested for 25 pounds of marijuana in Huntington Beach. That's another story, but anyways, I was picked up by this dude, and as we drove down the Ocean Boulevard, he said to me, "I have to make a short detour and pick up some Valiums." I said, "Okay," and we turned to Coronado Street and drove a few blocks up the street. He parked in front of a small apartment building and said, "Hey, I'll be right back." I was waiting in the car, and he came from the apartment to the car. He said his cousin had locked the Valiums in his safe, and he had paged him and was waiting for him to call with the combo. He asked if I wanted to come up and smoke a joint. I was like, okay, because I was a pothead already. I followed him upstairs and entered the apartment. I sat down on the couch and immediately scanned the room for weapons because he was kind of strange. Long Beach is full of strange people. I saw a pair of scissors and some other stuff scattered around the apartment. It was fairly clean and well kept. As I'm looking around, he reaches under the couch for what I thought was a weed tray. He says, "Hey, have you ever seen one of these?" And as I look at what was in his hands, it's a pair of flex cuffs. And he says, "Try them on," and attacks me. He grabs my wrist and pulls out a can of mace and sprays me in the face. He is able to get a zip tie around my wrist, but I pulled one hand out as he tightened it. I jumped up as we were fighting. I grabbed the scissors, and he got me in a bear hug from behind. I stabbed him in the face as he was trying to pin my arms. I am fighting for my life and stabbed as hard as I could. His grip moved up and pinned my arms and began choking me from behind. I was not able to breathe and thought that I was going to die. So I went limp and acted like I was done. He dropped me to the floor and dragged me to the bathroom by my arms. He opened the bathroom door and turned on the sink water and said, "Wash your face." And he left me standing there. I immediately jumped up into the rim of the bathtub, and he stuck his arm in the door holding a towel. I was going to jump out the second-story window when I saw his arm sticking out through the door. I body blocked the door, and he fell back, and I jumped over him and ran to the front door. I got to the front door, and to my horror, I saw that the key was locked on the inside. I grabbed the doorknob, and it turned and opened. I ran outside and began beating on every upstairs door of the apartment complex. It was like 12 units, so I ran and yelled, "Police! Police! Call the police!" I ran downstairs, and there were two guys tossing a football on the street. They must have tripped out because I was freaking out, and I had a zip tie around my wrist. They asked me what was going on, and I told them what happened. Now, I'm not homosexual, and I explained what was happening, and so the two guys, they helped me cut off the zip tie off my wrist, and the weirdo tried to come out and leave. The guys that were helping me told the guy that the cops were on their way, and that he was not going to go anywhere. I heard the sirens, and 3 police cars came with lights and sirens blazing. The police asked me what happened, and I explained about everything that happened. They went up to his apartment and came down and told me that I had gone up to the apartment. I did not want to go back in there. He told the police that I tried to rob him, and I stabbed him in the face. He said he was not gay, and the cops took a look around and found some gay stuff, and they had the zip tie that was cut off from my wrist. They took me outside and explained because I was a juvenile. My parents would come and get me from the station to press charges. They told me that if they arrested him, I would be coming also. I said I refused to press charges because I didn't want my parents involved. They left and I went my merry way. My mom got out of the federal prison and I moved to Texas for 5 years. I came back and my mom and sister had bought a house almost directly across the street from the 12-plex. My sister said that she wanted to introduce me to her new husband. I almost had a heart attack. It was the dude tossing the football that day, and he said, "Where did I know you from?" I was like, "You remember that kid that had the zip tie around his wrist?" And he was like, "No effing way." That's one crazy story, and I got many more. I'm hoping this is vague enough to remain anonymous because those involved are still out there somewhere, and I really prefer not to encounter them again. However, I will say that this happened in the United States. For reference, I'm a female, and I was in my 20s. I was living in an apartment with my mom and little brother while I attended my community college. When we first moved in, the apartments were very well run. But within the short time, the manager was transferred somewhere else, and his replacement did not have his skills at keeping undesirable types out. The police become a regular sight in our neighborhood, and it was a rare day we would go by without seeing them. The woman who moved downstairs from us began openly dealing drugs. People will come and go at all hours of the day and leaving little bags of various substances into their pockets, mostly weed, but definitely other stuff as well. They could not have been more obvious, even if they tried. And there was always a crowd of shady-looking men with large, unfriendly dogs hanging around the yard, or even sitting on our stairs. They act like it was a personal insult if we interrupt them to walk up or down the stairs. It would be generally quite intimidating. The breaking point didn't come until their customers started getting the wrong addresses and coming to our door instead. We'd be sitting in the living room and hear footsteps come up the stairs, and the doorknob would turn and jiggle against the lock. We'd become religious about keeping the door locked tight. One night, I was home alone and somebody started just beating on the door. Not knocking. It was more like he thought it was a punching bag, all the while screaming barely comprehensible obscenities. I grabbed the biggest butcher knife out of the kitchen and shouted through the door that I was calling 911, and he ran away. In hindsight, I probably should have just actually called, but I was just relieved that he was gone, and since I haven't seen him or what he looked like at all, I figured it wouldn't be much of a use. After that thought, I always pushed the couch in front of the door every time before I go to bed. My mom had enough. She tried going to the manager first. It was met with a total lack of interest from her, so she decided that there was nothing to be done but contact the police about it herself. So she called about it and got off the phone looking happy because they at least seemed like they were going to take her seriously and promised to investigate. The first sign of trouble came to the next night. There was a lot of thumping and bumping downstairs, and a peeking out of the window, showing people going in and out of their apartment, carrying cardboards and boxes of a dented van on the street. Bright and early the next morning, the police raided the place, and you guessed it, clean as a whistle. At first, we didn't realize the implications of this. When it started back up again the next few days later, my mom called the cops again, and the same thing happened. At this point, we realized it probably wasn't a coincidence. Somebody in the local police department was most likely tipping them off. One of the curses of a small town. I was angry and disappointed, but at least we tried, right? It never hurt to try, right? I wish. About a week later, I was getting ready for an evening class. I had just gotten out of the shower and I was in my bedroom in a bathrobe and picking out what I wanted to wear. I heard a loud bang in the front door. I didn't think much of it, but we've been expecting a package and the UPS man always knocked loudly. My mom's footsteps went to answer it, and I hear her say something, and I couldn't make out the words, but her tone caught my attention. I felt like something was wrong. I reached for my door, but before I could open it, it flew open to my face. All my shocked brain could grasp was huge man with gun in my bedroom. Before I was grabbed by the shoulders and flung to the floor, I honestly thought the druggies downstairs had come out to get us for once and for all. I thought I was about to be assaulted and murdered. At this point, I should mention, I had an issue with one of my wrists for years due to a childhood injury. I had it operated on twice, and this was not more than a few months after the second operation. Naturally, I managed to land on my full weight on my wrist and heard a loud crunch. I did what any tough person would do and immediately burst into tears and sat there, clenching my wrist, waiting to die. I guess I must not have looked very threatening like that because he stepped back a bit, and when I saw the police on the front of his vest, the next few minutes were a bit of a blur. Somehow I was herded out into my living room where my mom was, and the cop left without saying more than, "Wait here." I was completely dazed. Mom was pretty much having hysterics, and there was all kinds of shouting and activity going outside. After a short while, the cop returned and informed us, to paraphrase, "Sorry, wrong address. Shit happens. We can't be perfect all the time. My name is Officer Schinken. Here's my card. You can call it if you ever have any questions." And he left. I went straight to the emergency room and spent the next 2 hours to get my wrist x-rayed and put into a splint. And then I went to my math class because I didn't know what else to do. I was terrified of being at home. Needless to say, I learned nothing whatsoever, but the support my teacher and classmates was assuring. The next morning, somebody knocked on the door. When my mom answered, it was Officer Schinken again. When I heard his voice, I started hyperventilating and went and hid into the bathroom, so I didn't hear what was said, but I heard my mom slam the door. She was absolutely furious. I have never seen her look so angry. Apparently, a good old Officer Schinken had brought along a carefully prepared document he wished for us to sign that has basically said that we understood that it was all a big mistake and that we do not seek legal action. She told him to go to hell and shut the door in his face. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. It was one of the nurses in the emergency room, saying that someone claiming to be a law enforcement officer had just come by trying to get copies of my ER visit records, but they didn't have permission to release those, and if I wanted him to have them, I have to come and sign the forms. Oh, hell no. Further questions revealed that yes, the man matched Officer Schinken's description, and furthermore, he had told the nurse that he was not that officer involved, but was investigating the incident. I started to find that pretty much everyone I told my story to would get a funny look on their face and say, "This cop, was his name Officer Schinken?" And then they would launch their own horror story about him. My high school teacher said that he shot one of her former students during a marijuana bust and left him on the ground to bleed to death. But the other officer on the scene did first aid and saved his life. One of our neighbors said that he dragged said neighbor's disabled uncle down a flight of stairs by his feet, hitting his head on every concrete step. Another neighbor said that Officer Schinken pulled him out of the shower by his hair and held a gun to his head over a parole violation. And Google said that he'd been fired once by a nearby city for shooting a handcuffed man in the head, killing him. He claimed it was over self-defense and was fired but never charged for any crime. The medical bills for the ER visit and such end up being over $7,000, and I didn't have insurance, so I basically had no choice but to file a lawsuit. I found myself a lawyer and submitted a claim, and that's when crap really hit the fan. We started getting disturbing phone calls all hours of the night. Sometimes just silence at the other end or the sounds of somebody breathing, and sometimes graphically sexual comments. When we stopped answering the phone, they just let it ring until the machine picked up, then immediately hang up and do it again. My mom went to her car one morning and opened the door, only to discover the handle had been coated in some kind of caustic chemical. She washed it off quickly, but still ended up with burns and an ER visit. I just got my permit and was out for driving practice when it began to rain. As I went down the highway, I flipped on the windshield wipers and discovered they'd been coated with grimy motor oil. It smeared across the windshield and completely obscured my vision. Fortunately, the road was empty enough and I was able to slam the brakes and pull to the side without getting into an accident. Other things started to happen too. Less severe but sinister given the context above. Somebody cut out a bunch of metal militia skull designs and tacked them over our wall or pushed them under the door at night. Like, what the hell? I still have no idea what that was supposed to accomplish. Furniture was stolen off my porch. My boots vanished when I left them there. And oddly, several pounds of weed in a plastic sack appeared on our porch one morning. My mom called the manager to come get it without going outside. For once in her life, the lady did something useful and actually fetched it and threw it into a dumpster. I have never felt so helpless in my life. What was I going to do? Call the police? Right. It was around this time that a friend who lived abroad suggested I come stay with them for a while for my own safety. I dropped out of school and left the country for 6 months while the lawsuit worked its way through. My mother and brother moved with family and then to another town without submitting a forward address. Eventually, my tourist visa ran out and I had to come home. I was a complete nervous wreck and I ended up settling out of court for a relatively small sum of money just to make it all over. My lawyer got a copy of the search warrant that they used. It was riddled with grammatical errors and switched between my apartment numbers, 18 and the unit down the street, 25. At random, the suspect was someone different with an entirely different name and who had an entirely different look than any of us had, and who had apparently sold some oxy pills. She lived in Unit 25. I saw a copy of her driver's license, and it said right in front of it, in nice, clean letters, Unit 25 as her address. I don't know. I have no proof, but it was obvious that somebody had been tipping off the drug dealers downstairs. And I often wonder if the wrong number on the warrant was not a mistake at all. Perhaps it was meant to be a retaliation for trying to get their friends in trouble. I've now regained full use of my hand, which my doctor had told me might never happen. I no longer have a heart attack at loud noises, and I only felt slightly uneasy when I see police uniforms, rather than a full-on panic attack. It's 6 years later, and I'm only now beginning to reclaim my life after kicking the PTSD and going back to finish school. I feel like I just lost the best part of my 20s to these jerks, and I'm still bitter about it. I currently live with friends in an informal situation. My real address is not on any documentation, and I get all my mail to a P.O. box in another town, depending on which document you're looking at. I supposedly live in 5 different places, scattered from one end of the country to the other, and I'm not going to change that until I move a lot further away from where this all happened. As far as I know, nobody involved ever faced any sort of consequences. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have. I hope you enjoyed these true survivor stories. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoy these stories. If you are asleep, well, maybe you can hear me in your dream world. Keep dreaming, as this is the only time where you can escape reality. And I'll let you listen to the rain. Enjoy the slumber world.